all together. Thank you to everyone who made this possible. I'm so inspired already and excited to explore this conversation more. So if you scrolled through the news today, you might have seen that Meta and YouTube appeared in LA Superior Court on charges of addicting young people to social media in a major step in the conversation about technology and its role in our kids' lives. You might have also seen that ProPublica published letters, handwritten letters and drawings from some of the over 3,500 children and teenagers that are being held in the Dilley Detention Center, ICE Center in Texas. And you may or may not have seen that the 170 countries got together and signed an agreement to remove one of the most damaging greenhouse gases, HFCs, and that includes the United States, a very rare example of international cooperation. This is the environment we're living in. These are the kinds of facts that we are dealing with, and this is what our young people are having to navigate and having to make sense of, a world that barely makes sense to anyone. But we're here tonight, what's so exciting is we're here tonight to talk about solutions and not just about the problems. And really the most inspiring point of this project and the reason why I'm here is the finding on page 6 of this report that young people themselves see classrooms as one of, or maybe the only remaining place to ask questions, to change their minds along with peers. And what an incredible statement of faith in the project that brings us here together tonight. And I'm so proud to be seated with these practitioners who are making that happen. And I just want to ask you, your first question is, how does your organization try to help classrooms do exactly that? What is your theory of change, each of you? Maybe start with Louise.
Well, first, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Vicki, and for your extraordinary work. What a fantastic report. We're really honored to be here and to be among such a great group of people. So I am the CEO of iCivics. iCivics is the largest civic education provider in the nation. If you're let's see, 27 and below, you probably have played an iCivics game. It's all free. And the idea behind the games is that you have the agency to do things. You are the president of the United States. You run your own law firm. You are the town manager. Whatever it is putting it in the hands of students. I will say the reason I'm here is that my 4th grader did it, and that's and like the Remington ad, I bought the company. Yes, and it's been really a lot of fun. So there are, in our network, there are over 140,000 educators that use our free resources all over 80% of counties in America. But before I go there, so we help teachers with instructional resources, we help teachers with professional learning, and we try to help them support a democratic classroom, which is what Vicki described. But before I go there, I will say something about Bret Stephens, because I sat at one of these events many years ago and listened to Cheryl Eiffel. I don't know if people know she is a civil rights lawyer. She said something that I have never forgotten, and it was that racism is a fact of life. It will always exist. It has always existed, and yet it was contained. And the way that you contain these things is through norms, institutions, culture, and in fact, people. So for iCivics, and the reason we have a policy shop, is that the only reason we spend so much time teaching about the Constitution is that it belongs to the people. If you lose the people, ultimately, you will lose your ability to have power. And it is very confusing for students who have been part of the March for Our Lives and all of these other movements that have not yet resulted in the kind of change that they want to see, because our institutions have not always been responsive. At the same time, having said that, there are movements which you just described that would go the other way. What is really important about anti-Semitism is that it will always be here. Bret Stephens said that, and yet, if we can actually rebuild the fabric, the civic fabric of our country and the civic strength of our country by ensuring that students understand the value of institutions and the value of the people, then we can get somewhere. So the reason I'm telling you that is because everything that Vicki described is obviously what we want, and yet we have to have a culture in which the people demand it, right? Parents need to go and say, I want this. So my job, and many of our jobs, is to support educators, and yet educators, if you threaten to fire them, are not going to be able to do this work. So it really is your job, not mine.
I also want to echo, thank you, Anya, thank you, Vicki. A lot of that just resonates with a lot of the work that we do at Common Sense Media, and so excited to be here, just listening to this and feeling the passion and the work ahead, and knowing how grateful we are to be able to see this work come to fruition. My name is Yvette Renteria. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Common Sense Media, and our mission is really around supporting children in every way possible so that they thrive in this digital age. And we do that in 3 ways. And one way we do that is by rating. So a lot of families might know us when they're looking to watch a movie with their kids and see if it's appropriate or not. That is one way we do that. And we do that with movies, with books, with EdTech tools. The other way we support is through our advocacy efforts. And so doing a lot of work in legislation, working to ensure that there's guardrails put on keeping tech companies accountable. It's a much harder task to do and growing to be even more difficult, but we'll stay committed to do that work. And then the third thing and what I wanted to talk about today is our education work. And so we have a curriculum that we put out back in 2010, and we called it Digital Citizenship Curriculum. And in that, it was a curriculum for kindergarten through 12th grade. And at the time, it was really about how do you create safe passwords? How do you not share your personal information? How are you on screen at a healthy moment of time? And just recently, last year, we updated our curriculum, and we've changed the name from citizenship because it has become a different term these days, and we're now calling ourselves the Digital Literacy and Wellbeing Curriculum, because so much of our work in this space is well beyond just going and thinking about the technical spaces and really thinking about the human and the well-being development of our young people. And so we have a curriculum for kindergarten through 12th grade, really focusing on, yes, privacy and state safety, healthy habits, AI literacy, and actually adding financial literacy because of all the gaming and gambling that goes on online that our kids experience, mental well-being, and media literacy. And our focus is really about getting these lessons out in front of our students and making sure that we focus on what we call our 4 mindsets, and that's creativity, critical thinking, human connection, and agency, and really so I really appreciated this idea of student-centered and student-focused and putting our kids and having the power that they can have using their devices and having their choices, whether an adult is present or not. So we do a lot of that work, working with school districts in addition to providing professional development training, because a lot of this content is not what teachers are asked to do. It's an added piece of content that is so vital as we raise our next generation of young people to become wonderful, powerful citizens of this world.
Joel Breakstone, the Executive Director of the Digital Inquiry Group. We are a relatively new nonprofit, but we are not new to this work. We were based at Stanford University for more than 2 decades, and we're focused on supporting young people to be digitally discerning. And we have done that by trying to identify what are strategies for finding better information online. We're all confused when we pick up a device. And what we have sought to do is to figure out what are strategies that actually work. And we did that by doing research with people who we thought might be skilled at finding information online. And we sat down and asked people to evaluate unfamiliar sources and observe them as they did. And we saw that there were really big differences across these groups. There was one group of people who were much more effective conservative than others. They were actually fact checkers at the nation's largest news outlets. And the thing that distinguished them more than anything else was that when they came across an unfamiliar source, they almost immediately left it. They didn't spend time carefully reading it, looking closely at it. They instead said, do I even know what I'm looking at? And what they did was they opened up a new tab in their browser and they looked for more information. And as a result, they were able to become much more oriented to what they were actually looking at and made much better decisions online. And so what we've tried to do is to create curriculum materials that are based off of the observations we made of what fact checkers did really well. We are not trying to create an army of mini fact checkers. Instead, we're trying to give students a set of small strategies that they can use in their everyday lives. And we teach them in classrooms. We, as Vicky was describing, give students opportunities to engage with real sources, to look at TikTok videos and Instagram posts, and try to figure out whether or not to trust them. And importantly, to then test, does this work? It's great to say we have a curriculum. It doesn't mean much, though, if we don't have evidence that it improves students' discernment. And very hopefully, we found that it does. We've done evaluations in a whole range of settings. The most robust one was across an entire urban school district in the Midwest, and we saw that after just 6 hours of instruction, which is less time than a typical teenager spends online in a single day, we can see real improvement in students' ability to sort fact from fiction online. And thank you. We've seen that pattern repeated in other studies by other groups, both in the United States and in Canada and in Sweden and Italy. So there's very clear evidence that this is a tractable problem. This is not something that we don't know how to approach. There are effective solutions. We just need to figure out ways to make sure that students have opportunities to learn them, and teachers, importantly, have the resources to do that effectively in their classrooms.
I love, first of all, that you're uplifting the work of fact checkers. I worked as a fact checker for writers at the New Yorker, and it was like such an amazing education, and also will make you like skeptical to the death for the rest of your life. So all three of you, are promulgating and supporting teachers to teach things that are not in the core curriculum, that schools are not held responsible for students' test scores on these subjects, that are all too often felt like an unfunded additional burden on top of everything else the schools have to deal with, both inside and outside the classroom. And just to name, organized groups of parents that are attacking the curriculum, attacking specific books, depending on the district. And obviously the broader political environment that's keeping some of our students home from school in the first place. So how do your organizations navigate these complicated environments, and do you have take-home lessons or initiative as it starts to get off the ground? Maybe I'll start with you, Yvette, and go around.
Yeah, I'll say this as in two ways. One, as a former teacher and principal myself, and recognizing like a part of the work as an educator, no matter what subject you teach or what grade you teach, is to create a healthy and safe environment. And so first and foremost, safety becomes like the number one thing, again, regardless of the grade. And so that always sticks in my mind as I think about our work that we do with districts, and the idea of like, what does it look like to create a safe space? Because we need our kids to be safe before they can learn. You can't learn in an unsafe environment. That's where some of our unfortunate kids who are coming from immigrant families aren't even going to school, because there's not that safety that they feel. And so we think about this, and was like, when we think about the work that we're asking teachers to do beyond what they're asked to being done, whether it's teaching English or science, is what can we do to create a safe space for our kids? Because that is at the core of what needs to happen for them to learn. And so for us to do that, we're saying, we're not trying to give you a prescription of a curriculum. We're saying, find moments of time to just have dialogue. Find moments of time to create a safe space. And what we will provide you all is dilemmas. And we were calling them digital dilemmas that could often allow kids to have a dialogue without personalizing it for them. And so that's oftentimes our starting point, is creating these digital dilemmas that we can bring in front of students, whether they're a kindergartner or a 12th grader, bring these digital dilemmas so you start getting that practice of engaging in ways and debating in ways that are healthy, and then building up to a point where teachers can be more comfortable getting into the meaty, the core issues that are kind of existing. But what are those places where we can also, an example of this is, a middle schooler text another middle schooler a funny picture of a kid, and really hurt them. And it's like, well, how did that make you feel? And, those are things that the middle schoolers probably have all experienced in different ways, but we're giving them that starting point to build that culture and that community. But ultimately, what's really important to us is to figure out a way to create a safe space in the classroom so that they can continue to build upon that and learning can really happen.
I think your framing of the question hit the nail on the head, which is the problem that we all face is there isn't a school subject in the day called digital literacy. And if we believe that this is a crucial skill, and I certainly believe that it is in our present moment, that this is a core civic skill to be able to make sense of the information that comes across your screens, we have to find a way to teach it in classrooms in a way that doesn't further burden teachers. I have the privilege of working with teachers all across the country, and whether it's with Newport Mesa Unified or Los Angeles Unified in Southern California, or in Lincoln, Nebraska, or Detroit, or Shreveport, Louisiana, teachers are hungry for materials. They want resources that they can use, but they also don't have time. The thing that is in greatest scarcity is time. And so we have to find ways that allow teachers to integrate these kinds of lessons into the curriculum as it exists, not as we hope it might be. And so at the Digital Inquiry Group, what we're trying to do is to find ways to teach these crucial skills in the context of history and civics classrooms. How can we provide opportunities for students to learn how to make sense of a TikTok video in the midst of a lesson about Reconstruction? So we've done a lesson about Reconstruction. Let's watch this TikTok influencer who's making a claim about the grandfather clause. Is this a good source of information? How might I figure that out? Is this person credible? Maybe not, but can I investigate that claim? And by doing that, we can hopefully begin to provide some moments where students can begin to learn these skills and to begin to infuse that throughout the curriculum.
A little short history lesson here. The Common Core introduced a set of standards. It's not that short. So introduced a set of standards, which then led to a set of tests that now parents have rebelled against, really, truly. At the time, social studies was going to be part of it. Because of political division, social study did not become a tested subject, at least not in this way. That had mostly negative consequences, at least up front, in that the entirety of the social studies departments were defunded and undercapacitated. So what we have now is almost no one at the district level, or very few people at the district level, who are overseeing social studies and the quality of resources. And then in addition to that, $0 in many districts for professional learning for educators. That is just not the way that ELA teachers, English language arts teachers, or math or science teachers are treated. It's just malpractice, let's put it that way. The upside of this, since we want positive, the upside of this is that there is no test. And so therefore, there is much greater flexibility in social studies classrooms to steer away from standards in many cases. And that is an opening. The other upside is AI. Now, I realize I could go on about downsides of AI. However, both in testing potential, but also primarily in the redistribution of what will be valued. And I do believe we are at a watershed moment in the valuation of the content infrastructure for our children. So the way I can tell whether something is true or not is whether it makes sense to me based on a substantial amount, but based on what I've learned from history or from other disciplines, right? Does this ring true or not? That's my first point. And so unless we invest in kids understanding that content, then I think we will miss this opportunity, but we have it.
I just wanted to add, and I thank you all for that. I mean, it just occurs to me that while we're presenting this as a curricular intervention, if schools don't deal with these issues in the classroom, they're going to be dealing with them in the principal's office. They're going to be dealing with them in the campuses, right? So we're talking about cyberbullying, we're talking about revenge porn, we're talking about racial harassment, and these are things that schools are going to deal with one way or the other, right? One of the really important things I think that the ways that our initiative is oriented is toward an asset-based approach. And so how do each of your organizations really take students as a resource, as partners, and as leaders in advancing this work?
Well, we start with them. So we have this new project I want to tell you about. It's about the rule of law. And it's so boring. I'm a lawyer by training.
I wanted to be boring.
Just so you know, it's terribly boring. But anyway, so we're trying not to make it boring. So what we did is we developed scenarios a little. So I think these scenario-based are really powerful. And so one scenario is where the student is a detective, and the detective has this huge case around human trafficking. And that case is going well, but it depends on this one witness. Guess what? The witness gets arrested for shoplifting. And what do? Do you actually prosecute the shoplifting, which will destroy your case? Or do you don't do what the law would tell you to do, right? So there's a real ethical dilemma there. So we took these scenarios, there's 10 of them, and we went to talk to kids about what they liked, what they didn't like, where they wanted to see, and they were so engrossed. It was so much fun to watch them do it. We tried to lead them through this design process. Now, there is a role for a curriculum developer. I am not, there are adults in the room, but we do start with them and their energy and this idea that there is hope and potential, and we can discern the truth, and to give them a sense of confidence that they are able to do that.
I will echo Louise. We actually started our new curriculum with the students at the center. We brought them in. They were the ones that helped us design our digital dilemmas. They were the ones that helped us design our activities. To brag about our students who were a part of this, they started off with us saying, let's think about this from our values. And what was really impressive was they came to us saying, when you think about technology, let's not just talk about safe passwords. Let's actually talk about what our values are and whether technology helps or harms our values. That was all from our students who really started us off and really built from that point. And then building on that, really them being able to say, okay, what are those digital dilemmas? And for example, another area where we're finding, because like I said, we just launched our new curriculum in August, they brought up a lot around parasocial relationships and these AI chatbot relationships. So they really brought us up to speed as we were developing, to the point now that as we are supporting educators and schools, there's a little bit of upskilling all of us adults in this space that we just don't know. So I think it was Lindsay's point this morning, in the beginning of this chat, is they are so, our students are so far advanced than myself and us older folks. And so I felt like what we've seen and what we experienced was that we learned from them, and now we're really needing to be able to upskill and provide training to our teachers because of the new content that they brought into us because of the world they just experience online. And two other points that I want to make is one, we do a lot of research with young people, and for example, our boys who are deeply, we're seeing a high percentage of boys in gambling and gaming, and them coming and saying we're not doing this because we love the gambling, humbling part. We're doing this because we feel a sense of belonging. You know, our girls showed within our data too that they're much more invested in their online time on social media, and this idea of like, we want to be there and we feel this urgency to have to post and say something, whether it's because I want to show that I'm achieving or I want to show that I believe in something. And so they were able to really kind of go through those experiences and build some activities so that, you know, we can get our students to really just consciously think about those choices they make online.
Amazing.
We learned a long time ago that the development of any curriculum material is incredibly strengthened by doing it in collaboration with students, that you need to test out materials. You can come up with great ideas in an office, but you have no idea of how well they will work until you give them to students. We discovered that very vividly. Maybe 15 years ago, we were making history assessments, and we sent out some draft items to a group of AP students who had finished their exam. They had some free time. Their teacher was willing to try them out. And unsolicited, they began to write some comments in the margin of the assessments. And so one student very politely wrote, "Confusing directions." Another student wrote, "I'm not sure what to do." And then another kid who clearly was fed up with these people sending off assessments that were confusing wrote, "Okay, so this is dumb. I don't know what to do. If you're going to write directions, make them as clear as the transparency of freaking water." And after we got over sort of, smarting from having, been told off by a 16-year-old, we agreed. Like, the assessment was really confusing and didn't make sense. And it was just this incredibly valuable lesson of that you don't know that until you put it in front of students and you work with students and you solicit their feedback and be in partnership with them in developing it and finding out what makes sense and how to do it better. And I would also say the other thing that has been very clear is that students, when they do struggle, like all of us, in making sense of information, it's not for a lack of trying. In many cases, it's because students have been miseducated, that they've been taught the wrong things to do when it comes online. As just one very basic example is that there is an incredibly enduring misconception that .org websites are better sources of information, even though anybody with $5 and 5 minutes can buy a .org domain. And it's not a mistake that the leading neo-Nazi organization in the United States has a .org website, right? And yet, 96% of students, when we surveyed more than 3,000 students across the country, did not find out that a website that received funding from fossil fuel companies that was talking about climate change was a problematic source because it was a .org website. And the vast majority of students said, it's good, it's a .org website, it should be good to go. So they were doing the thing that they had been taught. Students just don't sort of spontaneously say, .org websites are good. They've been taught those things and they're trying to do them. So we need to make sure we're teaching them the accurate kind of approaches and not be paying attention to websites, given that students are spending their time online.
But .orgs are good.
iCivics.org.
Was it our curriculum?
Inquirygroup.org.
Well, we're trying to teach them critical thinking, but also within the framework of accepting our authority. So this is going to be an inherent conflict, right? The first time my kid was like, wait, I don't think I have to do what you say. I'm like, excuse me, hold on. So, and speaking of which, right, we need to talk about the parent part of the equation. What is our call to action to families, presuming that we can have them as our partners in this? Not all of them are going to be on board, and that's maybe something you can talk about too. But maybe I'll start with you again, Yvette.
Yeah, we, I'm fortunate to be sitting in this role in Common Sense Media because I'm a parent of 9-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, and I don't think I would have known half of this stuff if I wasn't in this work. And I say that because I do think that parents are in a space right now where there is a lot of questions and may not even know what their own children are experiencing online. And so there is a little bit of like exposure that needs to happen even before the learning and the tricks and the strategies. But what does it mean and what does it look like to engage with a chatbot? What does it mean and what does it look like to have, the YouTube scrolling over and over again? And then, oh my gosh, as a parent, don't even tell me about parent controls because that's so complex. I was like, this is just so difficult and it changes every minute after every upgrade on your phone or whatnot. So I just say that to say, like, there's a lot of, I think, confusion and question. And as we work with parents, even just like what movie is safe, it's become so much more complex than that. And we try our best to provide tips, but I'm saying this to say our vulnerability is like, we are really trying to figure out how we get to parents. And at the same time, educators are like, well, we shouldn't be owning this. This is a parent situation. They're the ones giving their kids cell phones. And so it feels like a little bit of a back and forth. But overall, it's like the kids are the ones that are going to be really needing those supports. And so as much as we can provide them tools, and I think there's a lot of organizations out there that are really just trying to figure this out. We work together as a coalition of several organizations who are like, how do we just get resources and advice to parents? And in certain communities, we know the power of community. So it's sometimes like getting advice from your aunties, or your grandmas, or your mothers, or the beautiful richness of communities in many ways. But those people don't know. It's our kids that know, because the grandmas and the tias and the uncles, and they just didn't have that exposure. So we're just trying to figure that out, to be in full candidness and vulnerability of like how we have a lot of tips, we have a lot of strategies, and we're just trying to figure out how to reach families right now.
So Vicki started by talking about the system, the classroom as a system. We do a lot of policy work. We have 8 people who do state policy work. And some time back, there was a rash of legislation which demanded that classroom teachers would share all of their lesson plans and all of their materials with the parents. So the question was, do you support such a thing or not, right? It is extremely time-consuming for educators who are already struggling with time constraints. And yet, at the same time, if you use that tool and you bring in parents in a conversation about what you're teaching and why, I think you will have much more support from your community. Classrooms and schools are being held accountable for a lot. As Vicki's research showed, it is now almost the only institution in the United States where we can actually meet people who are not necessarily. We are segregated by income levels, but not as much as we think. And there is still quite a lot of ability to talk to people we don't agree with and who don't share necessarily the same values. But that is not the end. That is the beginning point of a conversation that needs to be had. So my hope is that that process will start with parents demanding that, demanding more civics, demanding more of the civil discourse and ability to share across differences, and providing a safe, or at least safe enough, that's my new word, safe enough environment for these conversations to occur.
Yeah, I would pick up on the idea of conversations. I think that the parents have a really rich opportunity to be in conversation with their children about what they're seeing on their devices, and to be honest about the fact that we're all confused, right? That we're living in a moment of digital confusion, and that there are really valuable opportunities in terms of being able to talk about how do we think about information, and what are the things that we should be looking for when we are trying to discern online, and that it's not that a set and fast number of rules, but instead trying to think through, like, what are better sources? What should I be thinking about? And some of those things are going to depend on your own personal belief systems, right? And then how you make decisions about your sources of information. We want to have those conversations with families, and to be in conversation about how to make those decisions and how to think about sources and the strengths and weaknesses of them, that they exist on a spectrum, and that it's not a set of binaries. And so that if you can have those open and frank conversations with your children, they're going to have an opportunity to learn much more about the content that they're receiving on their screens.
I mean, I love what you're both saying about, the humility that parents can approach these conversations with, that we have just something to learn from each other. We don't have it all figured out. And rather than it be a lecture that I'm delivering to you, it's really these are real questions, right? That we're all trying to figure out. So in the conclusion of her presentation, Vicki outlined 3 OR challenges. And a lot of them, really, just as we're doing here today, I mean, we're bringing in together these different domains, right? We're bringing together the domain of content that isn't always approached, the skills of civic discourse, and also of digital literacy. And to do that, also, we need a multi-pronged approach where we need to have teachers working hand in hand with technologists, working hand in hand with students, and in communities. This all adds up to some sort of like intentional human-centered design, right, for civil discourse. How does that land for each of you on a practical level based on the classrooms that you work in? What do you think are the main sort of like exciting ideas about that and the things to watch out for?
It's very, very hard. Just say, to do this at scale in this country at this time is extraordinarily difficult. So the first time I heard about the OR initiative, I was like, oh, okay. This is not easy work. This is very, very difficult. And I think that the way you've approached it is really very well done, and I have a lot of confidence that it will land. But the reality of the infrastructure as to what we have at scale in this country is there's a lot of rebuilding to do. So that is a major, major challenge for us as a community and as all of its components. We need to work on the policy level, we need to work on the political level, we need to work with classroom teachers, we need to work with district administrators, and we need to work with youth groups and outside of school, right? This is not only a classroom problem. So there's an enormous amount of work for us to do.
Yeah. I get really excited about it because it's necessary and the time is now. Because if we don't address this, like the challenges of kids growing up in today's world is going to just continue to build. Like, this is a really important time for us to understand, like, the classrooms are, I mean, shout out to our teachers who are just working hard and like trying to find that space to be able to engage. And classrooms are often a safe space where kids can test and explore. And I think that's the beauty of education, for young people to test, explore, try things out, and being able to bring that in is wonderful. I'd say digital literacy, of course, that's the work that we do. And I think it is, we have to figure out how we weave it into the school system. Again, lots of demands out there, but this is part of kids' life. And then like just the collective capacity, it just takes everybody, from funding opportunities to like, I mean, I'm not going to repeat what Louise said, it's exactly what Louise said, but if we can always, and if we can think about putting our kids at the center of all this, I feel like it's very possible. But we have to all be committed, from wherever our viewpoints are to wherever our ideologies are. If we can all be committed to making sure our kids are at the center, I really do think it's possible.
Yeah, I certainly agree that I can't think of something more important in the present moment. But it's incredibly challenging, and the moment for teachers is particularly fraught, and that we can't layer on one more responsibility onto teachers' backs. We have to find ways to weave it in and to support teachers to do this work. The thing that we have heard over and over again is, great, how do I do this, right? That this can't be up to each and individual teacher to figure out how to do it, that there are so many mandates across the country for digital literacy in particular. Almost none of them come along with any kind of resources in terms of paying to make curriculum or to support teachers to use these things in their classrooms. And so we have to figure out ways to make that a reality in terms of supporting teachers, and that there isn't going to be a single pathway. I think that it's also important to realize that what might be possible in Orange County is not the same thing in other parts of the country, and that in all places, we might not be able to take on the most controversial issues, like that may not be the place to start, and that starting at a slightly lower temperature is the entry point, and that we can build from there, and that there needs to be sort of a menu of options so that this can indeed be something that can be used all across the country. And then the last thing I would say is that just how important it is to continue to think about assessment, that it shows up in the excellent report that the OR team has put together. But I really want to emphasize that, is that so often digital literacy has been big ideas without a lot of evidence that it is anything connected to what actually works or leads to student learning. And if that continues to be the case, we will all suffer the consequences.
I mean, I think at the same time that these are so many challenges, it solves for so much at the same time, right? Because there's such vital moves that we all need to participate meaningfully in a democracy. And, as you're going through all this, I'm thinking about on the morning after January 5th, January 6th, I'm sorry, I zoomed into a high school class, which was on Zoom because it was still remote learning. In New York City, this teacher had been up till 3 a.m. putting together a lesson plan from scratch to try to help his students make sense of what had just happened. And he had memes from the Family Guy. He had annotated videos. Together, they took this time. It was like advisory in ELA, English class. He was creating a safe space for them, a space to talk about how they felt, to make sense together. What actually happened? What did we just see? Situated in history, situated with what they were already learning about the history of colonialism, of racism, what is called a riot, what is called an uprising. And, it was so masterful and so incredibly hard, but also so important. And I'm sure that those students are never going to forget that class.
Yeah, I mean, it is an unusual example, but that sounds absolutely fantastic. I think the point embedded in that is that the students are coming into classrooms incredibly excited to learn. They see what's happening, whether through their TikTok or whatever feeds. They want to know. Right? And I think the teachers are those who are so much more afraid. So that's why we need to support our teachers so that we can have these conversations and leverage the energy that students are coming in. I mean, if we don't do that, it's a waste of energy, right? We are not actually doing the job of teaching someone. So.